There are so many things we teach children as they grow up: reading, writing, basic math, how a bill becomes law, the water cycle, how to swing a bat. School does an admirable job packing all of that into such a limited window of time, and teachers are already stretched about as thin as they can go trying to fit all of that in. But there are five things that rarely make it onto any curriculum, five things that shape a child's mental health well into adulthood, and most of us were never formally taught a single one of them. Some of this can fall on schools when there's room for it, but to be fair, a good portion of it falls on us as parents and caregivers, since we are the ones spending most hours shaping how a child comes to see themselves and the world around them. Now, none of these require a special program or an expensive workbook. They just require a bit of intention from whoever is raising that child, in a willingness to slow down in the small moments that come up naturally throughout an ordinary week. So, here are five things I believe every child needs to learn, whether that happens in a classroom or around the kitchen table. Number one, how to play correctly. Young children learn almost everything through play. It's how they figure out how to make friends, how to negotiate, how to lose gracefully, how to win without rubbing it in someone's face. When a child hasn't learned how to play well, the signs tend to appear quite fast. They skip their turn when nobody's looking, they get quite nasty when they lose, they gloat when they win, they bend the rules just enough to tip things in their favor. Now, picture a group of 8-year-olds gathered around a game of Monopoly. One of them keeps sneaking extra money from the bank when the others aren't paying attention, or throws the board across the room after landing on a bad square. That kind of behavior doesn't stay contained to one afternoon. The other kids are going to notice. And they respond the way kids respond, by deciding without much discussion that they'd rather just not invite that child to play next time. That exclusion is going to build fast, and a child who keeps getting left out of the game starts to internalize something painful about themselves. They start to believe that they're unlikable. Their self-esteem takes a hit that has nothing to do with talent or intelligence, and everything to do with how they treat the people around them during something as simple as a board game. This is where an adult can step in and make a real difference. If you're sitting across from a child during a game and you notice them cutting corners or turning into a poor sport, that is a moment worth pausing for. And that redirection doesn't have to go with shame or a lecture, maybe just something like, let's try that again the right way. Now, some kids pick this up naturally without much guidance at all. Others need a few rounds of correction before it finally clicks. Either way, teaching a child how to play fair is one of the most underrated gifts you can give them, because it's often their very first classroom in how relationships work. Number two, how to validate their own emotions. A lot of us grew up hearing some version of, "Don't be so angry," or "Stop crying, it's not a big deal." The intention behind those phrases usually comes from a good place, but they tend to blur the line between behavior and emotion. A child might be having an aggressive outburst, and underneath that outburst is a much simpler feeling, like disappointment or embarrassment. So when we jump straight to correcting the behavior without acknowledging what's underneath it, the child never learns to identify what they're actually feeling in the first place. Picture a 6-year-old melting down in the cereal aisle because their parent won't buy the sugary cereal with the cartoon mascot on the box. The easy response is to say, "Stop crying, we're not buying that," and drag them out of the store. But underneath that meltdown usually is something much simpler, like disappointment or maybe embarrassment that other shoppers are watching. A parent who pauses and says, "You're really disappointed right now, and I understand that," is doing something the child cannot yet do for themselves, which is putting language on an internal experience that otherwise just feels like an overwhelming wave. There's a concept called affect labeling, and the idea behind it is pretty straightforward. Naming an emotion tends to soften its intensity. When a child can pause and say, "I feel frustrated," or "I feel embarrassed," that single act of naming the emotion gives them a bit of distance from the feeling instead of being swallowed by it. This is a skill, and like any skill, it has to be practiced and modeled. As adults, our instinct is often to shut down the unwanted behavior as quickly as possible, which makes total sense in the moment, especially in public or when we're feeling just exhausted. But there's real value in separating the two. You can discourage the behavior while still validating the emotion behind it. Something like, I understand you're upset that your turn is over, and it is still not okay to throw the controller. That teaches the child two things at once. Their feelings are legitimate, and their actions still have limits. Once a child gets comfortable naming what they feel, they can start asking a much more useful question. What is a healthy way for me to handle this feeling right now? That question alone can change the trajectory of how they cope with hard emotions for the rest of their lives. Number 3, how to accept uncertainty. So much of adult life comes down to an inability to sit with not knowing. We want guarantees. We want to know the outcome before it happens. And when we can't have that, our nervous system treats the unknown like a threat. This pattern usually starts young, and it starts because we, as caregivers, tend to offer false reassurance instead of teaching children how to tolerate the discomfort of simply not knowing. Think about a child who's nervous before a test or a big game. The instinct is to say, "Don't worry, you're gonna do great." That comes from love, but a child's brain is smarter than we give it credit for. Some part of them knows that the outcome isn't actually guaranteed, and the reassurance rings hollow. A more honest and ultimately more helpful approach sounds something like, I don't know exactly how it's going to go, and that's okay. Not knowing is uncomfortable, and you can handle feeling uncomfortable. That sentence does something really powerful. It doesn't pretend the uncertainty away. It teaches a child that uncertainty can be tolerated rather than avoided. Or think about a family going through a move to a new city. A child asks over and over whether they'll make friends at the new school, and it is so tempting to answer, "Of course you will, everyone is gonna love you." But a more grounded response sounds like, "I honestly don't know how it's gonna go at first, and it's normal to feel nervous about that. Whatever happens, we're gonna figure it out together." That kind of honesty builds trust because the child eventually experiences the new school for themselves and remembers that the adults in their life told them the truth instead of a comforting guess. Now, of course, that doesn't mean being cold or dismissive about their nerves. You can still comfort a child while being honest with them about what you actually know and what you don't know. The goal isn't to strip away the discomfort of uncertainty, because that discomfort is a normal part of being human. But the goal should be to help a child build a relationship with the unknown that doesn't involve panic every time that life doesn't hand them a guarantee. Number 4, how to value effort over outcome. Outcomes matter. Grades matter. Wins matter. And pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But when a child's entire sense of self becomes wrapped up in results, they start making short-sighted decisions just to secure a good outcome without ever learning the process that actually produces good outcomes consistently. That's a fragile way to move through the world, and it tends to fall apart the moment life gets unpredictable, which inevitably it does. Think about a middle schooler preparing for a piano recital. If every conversation leading up to the performance revolves around how well they'll play on stage, the child starts to associate their entire worth with a single evening. If instead, the conversation revolves around how many hours they practiced, how they handled the tricky section in the second movement, and how they responded when they kept messing up the same measure, they start building a different relationship with the work itself. One that doesn't collapse the moment that the actual performance doesn't go as planned. One exercise that works really well here is having a child grade their own preparation before a big test, game, or performance, completely separate from how it actually turns out. Ask them to rate their effort like a report card. An A+ means they left absolutely nothing on the table in how they prepared. An A- might mean they gave a very strong effort with a small area or two that they could tighten up next time. Then, let that preparation grade earn just as much praise, if not more, than the outcome itself. When a child learns that this is what earns recognition from the people they love, something valuable is going to happen. If the outcome doesn't go their way, they don't collapse into hopelessness. They go back and examine their preparation instead. That's a far more productive place to land than despair, and it keeps them engaged instead of giving up. Now, our brains will always care about outcomes to some degree. That's just wiring that we cannot undo. But a child who learns to weigh their effort alongside their results develops a kind of resilience that carries them through setbacks that most people never recover from gracefully. Number 5, How to repair after a rupture. This last one might be the most overlooked of all five, and it might be the most important for how a child grows up to handle relationships. Conflict is unavoidable. Kids argue with siblings, fall out with friends, snap at a parent after a long day. But what determines whether that conflict becomes a lasting wound or a small bump in the relationship isn't whether it happened at all. It's what comes after. Most children are never taught how to actually repair a relationship once it's been strained. They're told to apologize, sure, but a rushed sorry mumbled under pressure doesn't teach a child anything meaningful about reconnection. Real repair looks very different. It involves naming what happened and acknowledging how it affected the other person, then actively doing something to rebuild trust rather than just moving past it and hoping the discomfort fades on its own. And as an adult, you can model this directly. If you lose your patience with your child and raise your voice more than the situation called for, come back later and say something honest like, "I got too frustrated earlier and you didn't deserve that tone. I'm going to work on handling that better." That single moment teaches a child more about emotional maturity than almost anything you could say to them. It teaches them that relationships can bend without breaking, that people can make mistakes and still stay close, and that closeness after conflict doesn't happen automatically. It has to be built. Think about a teenager who slams the door after an argument with a parent and doesn't speak to them for the rest of the night. If nobody circles back to that moment, the two of them just move forward as if nothing happened, and the unspoken tension sits underneath every interaction that follows. Now, picture the alternative, where the parent knocks on the door an hour later and says, "That got really heated, and I want to understand what you were actually feeling." That single gesture teaches the teenager that conflict doesn't have to mean distance. A child who grows up learning how to repair rather than avoid or bury conflict tends to carry that skill into every relationship they build for the rest of their life. Friendships, romantic relationships, even how they eventually parent their own children one day. This is a skill that keeps people close instead of letting distance build between them without anyone noticing, and it might be the single greatest predictor of whether someone grows into an adult who feels genuinely connected to the people around them. Now, none of these 5 things require a curriculum overhaul or a degree in psychology to teach, but they do require intention. Playing fair, naming emotions, accepting uncertainty, valuing effort, and knowing how to repair after conflict can be lessons that are woven into ordinary everyday moments. A board game after dinner, a tough loss at a soccer game, a tantrum in the car, an apology that actually means something. And none of it requires us to find the exact right words every single time. It just requires being present for those moments instead of rushing past them. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and see you in the next one.